How measuring time altered human behavior. Time once moved with the sun. It rose, it set, and life followed. Then we learned how to count it. To understand how measuring time changed human behavior, we have to return to a world without clocks. Time was experienced, not tracked. Days were guided by light, seasons by weather. Work ended when bodies tired, not when a number was reached. Time belonged to nature, not systems. This mattered because behavior followed rhythm, not precision. Tasks expanded or contracted naturally. Waiting had no exact length. Urgency was situational, not scheduled. Life adapted to time instead of obeying it. Then measurement entered quietly, first through calendars, then through mechanical clocks. Time was divided, labeled, and standardized. What had been a continuous, undifferentiated flow was broken into discrete segments, each assigned a number and a name, each carrying the implicit expectation that it would be used productively. Moments that once flowed became units that could be counted, compared, and sold. At first, this brought coordination. Meetings aligned, travel synchronized, trade accelerated. Measuring time made cooperation possible at scale. Society gained speed and reliability. The ability to synchronize activity across large numbers of people transformed what was possible in commerce, governance, and collective enterprise. But something deeper changed. Time stopped being a background and became a resource. Minutes could be wasted, hours could be owned. Punctuality became virtue. Delay became failure. Behavior adjusted to the measurement itself. The clock, which was invented to describe what was happening, became the force that determined what should happen. The tool had become the master, and the master's demands were relentless. People began thinking in segments. Work was separated from rest. Productivity replaced effort. Value was assigned not to what was done, but to how long it took. The quality of work, its significance, its contribution to understanding or human welfare, became secondary to the efficiency with which it was completed. Time became the universal measure of value. The clock did not just measure activity, it reshaped it. The measurement became the organizing principle around which all other considerations were arranged, and activities that did not fit the temporal framework were gradually marginalized or eliminated. This was a turning point. Time was no longer something humans lived inside. It was something they managed. And once time became measurable, human behavior began orbiting the measurement, not the experience. As clocks spread, behavior became synchronized around numbers instead of needs. Days were broken into identical pieces. Tasks were assigned durations. Life began conforming to schedules rather than situations. This felt efficient. Predictability increased. Coordination improved. Large systems could function smoothly because everyone followed the same time. Factories ran on shifts. Schools ran on periods. Cities moved to a shared rhythm. The individual's relationship to time was no longer personal or contextual. It was communal and standardized, enforced not by authority, but by the simple necessity of participating in a world that had agreed to count its hours. But the cost was subtle. Time stopped responding to context. A minute felt the same whether spent resting or rushing. Fatigue became irrelevant to the schedule. Attention was divided according to the clock, not the mind. This mattered because behavior adapted to what was measured. Speed became valuable. Pauses became suspicious. Slowness was treated as waste. The assumption that faster completion always represents better performance became so deeply embedded in the culture of productivity that it ceased to be questioned. Even in contexts where speed demonstrably reduced the quality of the outcome, the clock rewarded output per unit time, not depth or care. Over time, urgency became constant. Deadlines replaced completion. Progress was judged by pace instead of direction. People learned to hurry even when there was nowhere to go. The sensation of urgency became detached from its original purpose and existed as a free-floating condition, a permanent state of acceleration that persisted regardless of whether the circumstances actually demanded speed. The measurement also changed memory. Events were remembered by dates, not feelings. Life became segmented into blocks that could be planned but not always lived fully. The future felt closer. The present felt shorter. The compression of experience into measured segments meant that each moment was experienced not on its own terms, but in relation to the moments that preceded and followed it, reducing the richness of the present to a waypoint between past and future. The act of measuring time created a constant awareness of its passage, and that awareness compressed the experience of the present moment by filling it with anticipation of the next scheduled event. Time had not changed, but human behavior had, because once time was measured precisely, it stopped being flexible, and flexibility was what once allowed behavior to breathe. The conflict reached its peak when the clock stopped being a tool and became a judge. Productivity was measured by hours. Worth was tied to efficiency. Time spent became more important than meaning created. This is the emotional breaking point. People began feeling perpetually behind, even when nothing urgent was happening. The schedule was always full. The day was always short. The clock demanded obedience without offering satisfaction. Mathematically, nothing was wrong. Time was being tracked accurately, but behavior was being shaped by the measurement rather than by human limits. The system optimized for uniformity, not well-being. As measurement tightened, flexibility disappeared. Tasks were rushed to meet deadlines rather than completed when ready. Rest became scheduled, not restorative. Leisure turned into recovery time for the next unit of productivity. The clock also erased variation. Everyone was expected to operate at the same pace, regardless of energy, creativity, or circumstance. Deviating from the schedule felt like failure, even when it produced better outcomes. The authority of the clock had become so deeply embedded in the culture of work and productivity that any departure from its dictates carried a psychological penalty, regardless of the results it achieved. The conflict was no longer about efficiency. It was about agency, about whether humans were using time, or time was using them. And the answer had begun to feel uncomfortably clear. The resolution begins when time is reclaimed as a guide instead of a ruler. Measuring time was never the problem. Forgetting why it was measured was. Once this distinction returns, behavior can loosen without losing coordination, and the relationship between humans and time can recover something of the flexibility it once possessed. This shift does not reject clocks. It reinterprets them. Schedules become frameworks, not commandments. Productivity is evaluated by impact, not duration. Rest is valued as necessary, not indulgent. The deeper insight is simple. Time is a medium, not a currency. Spending it efficiently means nothing if it is spent on the wrong things. Measurement can organize life, but it cannot define what makes it meaningful. When humans followed the sun, behavior adapted naturally. When they followed the clock, behavior adapted mechanically. The challenge now is learning how to combine both. Time did not imprison behavior. We handed it the authority to do so. And the moment that authority is questioned, time becomes human again. Not a resource to be optimized, but a medium through which experience unfolds at its own pace, shaped by attention and intention rather than by the mechanical division of hours into identical, interchangeable units. Subscribe to join the journey.